Steve and Alan's Pro Tips in a Short Time Learn a Lot.
Hey, Steve, what have you been up to?
Well, Alan, even though I try to take some time off in the summers, I also like to use the downtime to save future Steve some stress.
Ah, yes, future Steve. I've noticed you care a lot about that guy.
Yeah, I think about him almost daily. What's your take? Should teachers unplug 100% from their jobs in the summer, or are they wise to use some of that time to prepare for the upcoming year?
Gut reaction, I think they're wise to use some of that time to prepare. But when I think about it a little harder, they should do whatever brings them joy. If taking some time to prepare for the upcoming year saves future self some stress, that's the way it was for me. I think putting in like 5 to 15 minutes a day or 1 to 3 hours a week, that saves a lot of stress for me in the future and still a bunch of time off. But if it brings someone joy to completely unplug for weeks at a time, do it.
Totally agree. Anyway, I was recently listening to our episode with Glenn Nierman, and I thought this would be a good time for me to come up with a couple of new assessments that I could implement next school year.
I have not thought about that episode in a while, but that was a good one. It was practical. Glenn Nierman, good man.
Yeah, and I loved this clip in particular.
The other one, of course, it's been very popular recently, are rubrics. Rubrics have become a term that we use kind of like we use Kleenex or Xerox copies. When we say that, we want to use a tissue, for example, we often say, well, I want to use a Kleenex. Well, it might be a Puffs or it might be whatever else. We've sort of come to that same kind of understanding with rubric too. Well, anything that has to do assessment has to be a rubric. And so sometimes you'll see the differentiations of levels in a rubric be something like perform this phrase with one rhythmic air, and the next level is with 2 or 3. Well, that's nothing more than a rating scale. And so I try to teach about a rubric being a qualitative assessment tool, meaning that it is a verbal picture, a verbal snapshot of what that student is or should be sounding or doing like in making music at a certain level. And it is based on a verbal description. And you can't do that in 1 or 2 words. You have to maybe write 2 or 3 sentences, and it should be a holistic assessment. So I'm not sure everybody's using rubrics to their full advantage.
Yeah, that was good. Okay, so you're out in the field regularly. What have you noticed since that episode, Steve?
Well, he's definitely right. I picked up on the fact that a lot of people do use the word rubric when they are often in reality just describing a proficiency scale. And I'm also not really seeing true rubrics used very much, especially in the context of the secondary ensemble classrooms.
So why do you think that is?
My guess, using a true rubric to measure and communicate assessment can often be more work for the teacher.
Ah, okay. So if you create a rubric to use next year, aren't you making more work for future Steve?
Well, maybe. If I'm the one filling out the rubric, yes, more work for future Steve.
Okay, I see where this is going.
Yeah, I thought you might. So one tactic that teachers might consider using a little bit more is asking students to fill out a rubric as a means of self-assessment.
Yeah, I love that. It might not be exactly the same scores that I would give as the teacher, but it's still a good learning opportunity for the students, and it gives teachers useful info too.
Exactly. And I've discovered the students are more often than not going to assess themselves pretty similar to how a teacher would. I mean, they know, right?
Yeah, I think so in many cases. I find that students could even be tougher on themselves than the teacher would be. But
Yeah.
okay, can you give a quick refresher on the difference between a rubric and a proficiency scale? Because I have also goofed that up.
You bet. So a proficiency scale, that's used for a specific topic or a progression of knowledge. So think about how a student demonstrates proficiency for the creating standard throughout the whole semester in a general music class, or how they demonstrate overall rhythmic proficiency in an orchestra, or their vocal tone production in a choir. So big picture stuff related to the curriculum and often boiled down to a single number or phrase like 5 out of 5 for tone production, or the student struggles to create their own melodic ideas. A rubric, on the other hand, is specific to a certain task or assignment and is used to assess students' quality of work, usually based on multiple factors. So very specific assessment to a specific assignment, and you can't usually boil it down simply to one number or phrase.
So have you given this some thought? Have you figured out what your new rubric is going to look like?
Well, in my jazz band, I typically have one selection for each concert that is particularly challenging for the students. Difficult rhythms, ranges, chord changes, key centers, less familiar style, so on. And I'm not going to reinvent the wheel. There are already lots of great examples of music performance rubrics online. I'm going to find one I like, and after we've rehearsed the chart for a few weeks, I'm going to ask the students to fill out the rubric to self-assess their own pitch accuracy, rhythmic accuracy, style, improvising, and so forth.
So just based on that specific tune, right? Not their overall abilities?
Exactly. So my hope is it will give them more direction as we rehearse that particular tune over the next month. So maybe one student realizes they need to put forth more effort on their rhythmic accuracy, while another realizes they have to remember to connect their 8 notes for good style. And then, right before the concert, I'll have them fill it out again. Then we can compare, see where we've improved, or where I might realize that I completely blew it with my literature selection or my teaching because they don't feel like they've improved or they felt like the chart wasn't attainable.
So could you have them fill out a Google form with their self-assessment for each of the factors? Then you could have everything in one spreadsheet right away without future Steve having to do any more work.
Yeah, Alan, that's why we make a good team. I was totally going to just hand out a piece of paper for each student to fill out. But yeah, for students who have access to devices, that's a great idea. I could quickly see the trends and averages for each aspect of the rubric as well.
I too am also all about helping future Steve avoid work.
And future Steve very much appreciates it.
Yeah, it's good stuff. Thanks, current Steve.
You bet. Have a good summer, everyone.
Steve and Alan's Pro Tips in a short time. Learn a lot.